Welcome to LOA Today. Walt and life coach Joel Elston here. Today is Thursday, May the 3rd, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Your first daily dose of happy for the day. And I'm happy to say Joel's back. I mean, I only get to talk to him once a week, but it's always great when I talk to him. So, Joel, how you doing, my bud?
Things are really good. I'm excited to be here. I love Thursdays, and that's getting to get caught up. And I've been waiting for this show. We talked a little bit about it last week about what we're going to be doing, and it's so relevant with a lot of the stuff I deal with on a daily basis with my clients. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, the impetus behind this week's show was twofold. First of all, like you said, last week we touched on the topic of blame, and afterwards, I remember asking you a question, something along the lines of, is there a valid role for blame in anything? And we decided that was a pretty good topic. And then this week you posted something on your Facebook timeline that said, I believe it was, victimhood is the new entitlement or something like that. And I figured, well, geez, we just found two topics to tie together. So we're going to be touching on something, once again, that's a little bit of a hot button, a little bit painful at times, and we'll obviously have to be a little bit careful about that. But nevertheless, this is very poignant. And like you said, you run into this in your practice all the time, don't you?
I do. And you as we discuss this, I always sort of like to give a disclaimer. The when you're going through traumas and you've been through really tough stuff, it's not, we're not minimalizing that, or we're not saying that it doesn't matter. But I see very often people become their trauma. They live their trauma year in and year out. They are defined by their trauma, and they become a victim of society. They become a victim of everyone. One of my stories, I shared this probably a couple of years ago when we were doing the show. When I was years ago, when I was in the middle of my addiction, I met this young lady. It's a very crazy story how I met her, but I ended up staying with her for about a week, and because I was desperate for a place to stay, and she was probably the most negative person on the entire planet. I mean, everybody was her, picked on her. Everybody did these things, and all she did was talk about how everything. She was even on Oprah Winfrey about, just almost being the victim of all these things. And
wow.
So I and I hung out with her about a week, and in the middle of my addiction, I took some money that it's called stealing. I stole money of hers, and moved on, and really didn't think much about her. And so when I got into good recovery, part of recovery is making restitution. And I remember doing that dastardly act. So I began the process of trying to find her. And I got recovery in 1995. This probably happened in 1988. So this is before the internet was so pervasive, and AOL and all the stuff that was really sort of just beginning back then. So I couldn't find her. But as time went on, I remember her son's name, and I found him on Facebook. Then I was able to find her. And the amazing thing, Walt, it was 20 years after I had seen her last, her Facebook posts were identical to the 20 years before. Everybody's against me, my own son's against me, and I felt so sorry for her. And I sent her money anonymously. I didn't want to get involved with her after seeing that. I don't want to get drawn into the negative. But I sent her some money anonymously with a money order, and she got it. She cashed it. I could check that. But wow, it just was interesting to see over a 20-year span, from my perspective, nothing had changed for her. And the biggest problem that I think that even more today than it was back then is almost this concept of, and that's where the blame ties in. It's nobody's at fault for anything. It's who do we blame? If there's there was a yesterday, I happened to catch a glimpse. There was some kind of airplane crash in Georgia. I think it's military, and the brief moment that I was at this store, and I'm hearing, well, what happened? Who's at fault? Was it pilot? Well, we just had 5 people die. Let's not that it's not relevant, so we don't do it again, but it's just we get to a default place of who's to blame, and that becomes, you look at all the investigations and all the things we have going in the government. It's just so much emphasis is placed on blame, And blame is the bedfellow of victimhood. Well, nothing's my fault. Everybody's picking on me. And one of the things that I work with my clients the most is about personal responsibility. At the end of the day, we are where we are because of us. Things happen. Our response to those things is in our control. And that's a really hard pill to swallow. And I inevitably, in fact, in the Facebook post you're talking about, and I chose not to engage him. But one of the people that did so well, that sometimes there's reason to blame, or sometimes you are a victim, and a lot of people hold on to that. I know people that protect their victimhood because they spent so much time on it. They protect it like they're guarding some valuable product or something valuable possession they have, and they're afraid to give it up. And it's debilitating. It really is, and it goes against where traditional therapy is going now, where oh, poor thing, this happened. We must just really spend all this time on your trauma. And I'm not minimalizing that we have to work on the trauma. That's absolutely a fact. But you just don't want to become defined by your trauma. And I think that happens a lot nowadays.
I think it does too. Another aspect of this, and this is where my question came in, I think. I was in a conversation with somebody on Facebook. It was about law of attraction. And at one point, I used the word responsible. And I said, specifically, responsible does not include blame. And I got challenged on that by someone saying, well, that's maybe the way you define it, but most people define responsibility to include blame. And I was specifically trying to find a word that says I am going to accept some responsibility for my own life, but I'm not talking about blaming myself or blaming anybody else. So I want a word like that. So I said, well, okay. Well, I understand your complaint, because I know that the word often is defined that way. Can you give me a word that does not include blame? And she admitted that she couldn't. But she also continued to defend the concept. And I'm thinking, and the concept involved blame. And I'm thinking, well, what does this say about our society? Every single word that I can think of, and I was going through them. It was like, well, there's responsible. That's probably the cleanest of them. There's fault. There's guilt. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them, and they all imply blame. I mean, isn't it possible that this concept that blame infiltrates every attempt to accept responsibility for one's own actions, that's what's driving the blame cycle?
Well, I believe so. It's one of the statements I use, and I actually have it on my phone, and I'm looking at it now. To be responsible is to be answerable or accountable. That's what being. At the end of the day, my decisions got me to the place that I'm at. To be at fault is to be responsible for a failure, or worse, or a wrongful act. And then the other definition for blame is. Finally, blame is not just to hold people responsible, but to find fault with. So there's this concept, even though it all sounds the same, at the end of the day, to me, responsibility, being responsible, is I can own my stuff. That's my stuff. And I don't need to get into the drama of let's figure out who's to blame, because the blame to me started as a legal thing where we need to find who's at fault to hold them accountable in the legal process. Well, now we have turned it into who's to blame to make excuses for behavior. And, this happened to me, so I have that's why I went out and killed 9 people. Well, that's, at the end of the day, you're responsible for killing 9 people regardless of what you went through. So there is that discussion, and a lot of people will say it's just semantics. But to me, it's how you define things. I'm very much the definitions of words. I think your inner dialogue is really important. Being responsible is a healthy mindset, to take responsibility, to be accountable. I did this, move on. Nothing works better if you're wrong to say, yes, you're right, I'm wrong, I apologize. But okay. That's hard to argue with that, Walt. If I'm responsible, absolutely. Well, so it does make a difference.
Well, there's also another piece of that too. We see all the time. It's become the new thing to do. If you're a politician who's been caught in some circumstance, then the the thing to do is to stand up and say, I take full responsibility. And when you actually iron it out at the end of the day, taking full responsibility amounts to nothing more than saying, well, yeah, I did it. So what?
Right.
I mean, there's no actual production of any good that comes out of it. It's just, well, I accept responsibility.
Right.
And I'm wondering, see, this is where I see blame coming into it. Because blame becomes the ongoing way of saying, I won't actually take any personal responsibility to the point of doing something about it.
Right. Well, to me, to be responsible and be accountable is more than just like the politician's version of it. It's actually doing. If I'm wrong, I have to make amends in some form or fashion, whatever that may mean. A lot of times, and I'll probably don't want to go there too deep, but I remember when Tiger Woods cheated on his wife and all this drama happened, and he goes in front of TV and, I'm so sorry, I take personal responsibility, it's my fault, blah, 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 and I'm going to go to treatment. Well, what he's saying is, it's not really my fault because I have a sex addiction. I would have had so much great respect if he'd have said, I did, and it's really between me and my wife, and I'm sure it'll cost me about $500 million when I'm done, but it's really none of your business. I would have been much happier with that answer versus, well, I'm going to go to treatment because I have a sex addiction, and hopefully my wife won't divorce me, and this will play better in the media. On the other side, years ago, David Letterman was caught having an affair with one of his people at work, and he goes on TV and says, "I did it. You're right. If they fire me, they fire me." He was suspended, and he accepted the suspension. Did not make a single excuse. He did his suspension without pay. All that stuff to me is about, there is a difference of taking responsibility, being accountable, and moving on. Blame is an ongoing process. Once you get in the pit of blame, it just keeps going. It's just, yes, however, this happened because of my childhood, or this happened because this person did this. And blame is a very deflective point of the law of attraction. In my mind, it has the opposite effect. Because the part of the self-responsibility in the law of attraction is really feeling I am accountable. I'm accountable for the way I feel today. If I'm happy, that's my choice. If I'm sad, that's my choice. And when I understand that helps a bunch. And there is a difference to me, but I can see where the average person would say, because it's so entrenched in our society. You see it in school all the time. Back in the old days, some kid would push a kid and they'd beat each other up. The principal would come and, and I'm not saying that was the best thing to do either, but they'd separate them and then they're done with it. Now they have these court cases over 9-year-olds fighting. And it's like, we've probably stepped over the line just a little bit in this blame game. And, so I don't go ahead.
So let me ask the question that I raised last week. What valid role does blame play?
In my mind, outside of a court of law, it has no valid role. In my mind, I see so much time wasted. Let me give you an example of a family coming in. You have the son who's an addict. The mom and dad have enabled him for years, and there's just so much stuff going. They could spend 7 months arguing over what the other one said and who's at fault, who blamed this. One life coach I know, which I really just respect a lot, she says blame is resistance to the law of attraction. It's part of the resistance of the law.
It definitely is. No doubt about that.
Yes, and so it to me the only advantage or the only point of blame would be from a legal standpoint. This person's at fault, and there's a consequence that society is going to place on this person, and that's where to me that's it for blame. It's being responsible. Here I am is much different than, well, yes, I did it, but, or this happened, but, and these things happened to me, so obviously I'm going to go this. So I just think it doesn't play a role in my world. Now, that this is an individual thing for a lot of people. I know that there are some, if we have traditional therapists listening that are just appalled by this thought process of it's not this person's fault because of what happened to them, or their depression is not their fault. And this is where I part ways. They are responsible for their own depression. People may have done things to them in the past, or traumas may have happened. But at some point, after we get past the initial stuff, we have to own it, our part in it, and move on.
Are there consequences to not taking that position? Because, like you said, the traditional therapeutic community in many cases doesn't agree with the idea of blame playing no role, because the general idea is, well, this just happened to you. You don't. It's not up to you to accept any blame for it. It was the attacker, or it was the abuser, or whatever it was, and they're totally to blame. And certainly the attacker or abuser deserves to say, hey, attacker or abuser, you did something that was way out of bounds, and you need to be held accountable for it. That goes without saying. But you're going a step further, and I think it's an important step to look at. So I'm not quite sure exactly what my original question was, but how do you deal with this fact that there are two different views on it? And I guess I know what the question was. The question is, what's the consequence of following through on the idea that the person who is depressed, the person who's in the bad place, doesn't have to accept responsibility for being in that place? What are the consequences of that?
I have seen people live in their victimhood and not take responsibility for years. It's a debilitating mindset. We had this. I've used this example several times in the last few months, and when I was at the Social Security office, and getting Justin's Social Security card changed over to his new last name and all. And we were there, and I was there and talking, listening, trying not to talk to people, leaving my headset. And I'm looking at a bunch of people who had things happen to them. And their big debate internally was how much disability they're going to get. None of this is their fault. They can't work. They're viewing it from such a negative that it just was very sad, because I'm like, oh my goodness, you're going to be getting $900 a month, and this is you'll have no mission. You can't. I don't understand why you would want that. Why that would be so valuable. And when I say that, of course, there's going to be people listening that disagree with that too. I'm not talking about severely or profoundly disabled people. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about somebody who hurt their back a little bit, and they have a little pain, and they're wanting full disability. And in reality, why don't you learn something else? Why don't you? There's a lot of things you can do that doesn't require you to use your back. But it is about looking at that role, and it has an intriguing concept to it. Blame it's sort of like, I talk about being addicted to chaos and depression. I see people that are addicted to blame and victimhood as much as anything else. It is something you can get stuck in for years, just like this young lady I described. Her consequence is she had spent 20 years, and probably it's been 10 years since that happened now. She's probably spent 30 years of her life being everybody's victim and not treated right. And what a horrible way to live, Walt. What a horrible way to live.
It is, yeah. How pervasive is that?
Very, and I think it's becoming more. I see it more and more of just the failure to for society, the concept of holding people accountable. And I'm not talking about hardcore. Just at the end of the day, let's quit. And I think that the news cycles and all the stuff sort of add to that, because you can't say a word without one of the politicians. They can't say a word with everybody just sort of it's like a feeding frenzy, 24 hours a day of everything that is said, and who's at blame and who's at fault. And if they spend as much time running the country as they did figuring out who's at fault for all these various little things, we'd be in really good shape. But they don't. They're spending all this time over there. So it is. I do think we have a tendency to do that, and this is another piece to get into that's something that we want to be really careful about is, and again, I don't want to upset anyone, but that idea that, it is you you have to respond to whatever happens in you, whatever's going to happen in life. It's going to come along. And you're going to have to deal with it. And I'll have people say, Joel, you don't understand what I've been through. I know people who have been through ungodly childhood, stuff that I would not even describe over the radio, terrible stuff, that have gone on to be wildly successful in life. They use that pain to move forward. They use that they refuse to be a victim. And so many people today, it's almost like an excuse not to perform. And it's rewarded sometimes. It's rewarded by, I know this one young man that I'm trying to work with right now. He's from a wealthy family. He's like 25 years old, and he's claims he can't find a job. He can't go to school. His anxiety's out of control. He's able to go party all weekend, and his family's supporting him. But he's able to go have a lot of fun. His anxiety doesn't hurt his having fun. But when it comes to getting a job, he's too anxious, and his parents just allow this to go on. And I told him, I said, and her word was not his fault. And I go, yeah, it really is. I'm not saying his anxiety is not real, but he's not doing anything to work on it or fix it. He's not taking any suggestions. And, he puts himself in a position where deep down, he doesn't want to work,
Wow. I had a conversation with somebody who is a law of attraction coach. I'm not going to name who it is because this isn't about personalities. But in this conversation, the person I spoke with said that in that person's opinion, the only way to deal with having been a victim of something, particularly something severe, is to go through often years of therapy, and there's no way to avoid being the victim. That in fact, there's no connection between the victim's thoughts and actions and so forth and being attacked. And so therefore, there's no way to avoid it. And when it happens repeatedly, the only thing to do is to go into therapy for long periods of time until you're able to desensitize it. And I mean, I was kind of, to use the British term, I was gobsmacked by that one, because it runs so counter to what I believe. So I want to see what your reaction is. I mean, what do you think? Is it something where, especially if it happens multiple times, that really there's just no connection to the person at all, and it's just something they have to deal with?
I see it. To me, that goes totally against what I believe in the law of attraction. At the end of the day, every single thing is our choice of how we respond to it. Horrible things happen. I'm not minimalizing that, but years of therapy to me is compounding it. It doesn't. I've shared the young lady that, not necessarily a young lady, middle-aged lady that had spent 16 years in her psychiatrist's office trying to figure out whether her father molested her or not. And I not that that's a horrible subject, and I'm sorry either way, but I literally told her, let's pick a side and move on. I mean, do you want to spend 16 more years of, here we are today. And this sort of gets into the concept of difference of life coaching, and especially law of attraction life coaching. Life coaching is about today forward. It is about, let's get solutions to where you're at now. You're depressed. Let's work on the depression. Let's do that. And therapy has its role. I'm not saying you don't need to look at it, discover it, but at the end of the day, do you want to spend 8, 10, 12 years? We don't have time for that in life. I mean, it's pick up and move on. And it sounds so easy. And I'm sort of in a position myself that I sort of have the authority to say that, because I picked up and moved on several major events in my life.
Well, not only that, you're also you're not just a life coach. You're also a licensed therapist. You have both.
Yes.
You have both sides of the coin here.
Yes.
So that gives you a unique perspective, I think.
Yes. And so I just, hearing both sides and seeing the effective nature of it all, the now going forward, the solution, the real time solution, the power of now is the book Power of Now. It basically is a lead into the law of attraction as well, but focusing your power on this moment.
Mm-hmm.
All that other stuff doesn't fit the power of now. It's just, one of the things that I always love to watch the nature channels, and the the gazelle that's running through the forest and, the plains where what would be chasing a gazelle? Maybe a lion, let's call that. So this lion's chasing this gazelle, and the gazelle's all over the place, really just panicking and trying to get away because the lion catches him. It's over. And the gazelle slips between these two rocks and makes it to the other side. The lion can't go there. What does the gazelle do? The gazelle stops and just starts eating. Okay, that was cool. The gazelle's, humans are the only one that have that. Oh my God, look what almost happened. The gazelle's like, it's done. I got to move on. I got to eat. Now I got to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And humans have a compounding factor of trauma. And, like when you're almost in a car wreck and you barely avoid it and your instincts take over, you're never scared while you're doing it. Then when it's done, you're like foot shaking, like, oh my God, I could have died. But while you're in the middle of it, humans have that ability to say, but we didn't die. And here's where I am. And you look at it, the focus on the historical stuff and the blame of why I am, it does help to understand why we are where we are. I have a very complex history. I have a lot of depression in my family. I battled depression. So I see where depression came from. I see where all that happened. It's a nice understanding that gives me a way to work on it. But I don't live in that world. It's not, it's okay. Now I can identify that does run in my family.
Mm-hmm.
But I get to choose, whether it's going to run in me now. And that's a piece that, as we move forward, I think that's a big battle. I think that'll be a continued battle. That the idea that this trauma is something that just takes years and years and years. And, it's such a sad way to live. I just don't think it's the right way to do it in my mind.
So we've kind of touched on the various aspects of this idea that you posted, that victimhood is the new entitlement, and that it creates a maybe we should just take a moment to kind of spell that out a little bit. Why is victimhood the new entitlement? Just so we can finish this conversation.
Yeah, and I do think that the victimhood, that quote, the reason it hit me is we seem to be, what is the new entitlement? What is the new thing that's out there that, I'm not at fault because of so-and-so, or what is the latest pop psychology theory out there? And excuse me, I'm battling a little cold.
Oh, that's all right. Take your time.
This idea that victimhood, how it does, what it does to you, it places you in that mindset, and people own it like it is. As I mentioned before, they own it like it is. I am not responsible because of my victimhood. Don't you understand that? And I have the perfect example of a gentleman I've worked with for years, and he has Tourette's syndrome, and it's a very baffling condition where you make these unusual sounds and noises when you're in public. Well, he's also a really severe compulsive gambler, and
wow,
what he will do is it's a terrible combination. He'll go into a convenience store and scratch tickets, lottery tickets, and then make these loud noises and cuss, and then he's asked to leave. And he has contacted probably 50 attorneys over the years. I'm going to sue them. They violated my rights. I have a right to be there. And I said, you don't have a right to sit there and use 4-letter words in front of little kids or just scratching off tickets, regardless of why. It's just, he doesn't, he goes, nobody, and he will own it with the biggest anger and passion. I'm the victim here. He will literally shout it. I'm the victim here. Nobody accepts that. Like it just means so much to be the victim here. And so it is an entitlement to some people, is sort of a pass for behavior. And it's, I'm entitled to things because this happened. There's other areas of entitlement over the years that have come up, and victimhood is, to me, we used to be more of a country that was more about, let's take responsibility. When I, again, I mentioned earlier my addiction, when I had taken, again, stolen money from a company I worked with, 25 years ago. And when I got tired of it, I turned myself in. I faced the judge. I offered no explanation or excuse. I said, I'm accountable, Your Honor. I plead guilty without any explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And she was sort of baffled by that. She said, well, is there a reason why? And I said, well, there's an explanation, but at the end of the day, I did it. And it turned out to help me because she appreciated the fact I was so, forthcoming. But it truly was just, I did it. I am a compulsive gambler. I still stole the money. And, the good news is I had to spend 30 days in jail. I had to pay, I paid every single penny back. So other than that, what else could I do? And so I owned it. And to me, it's freeing. If I would have just ran around, oh, I'm the victim here, I'm the compulsive gambler, nobody understands that. I never would have accepted my role, and I couldn't have moved on. My success is because I accepted my role. Today, my success is built on that foundation of personal responsibility. When I'm wrong, I admit it. Boom, move on. And if there is restitution or there's amends to be made, I'll make it. Period.
Okay. So let's take it one step at a time going in the other direction. Let's say you actually have somebody in front of you in your office, in your clinic, who is a victim, and they have recognized, miracle of miracles, they've recognized that they have a role. They played in it. What's the way out?
Well, first it starts with it takes a lot of work to get the concept of what we're talking about. This is so difficult to get people to. You have to present it slowly. Like sometimes I'll post things on Facebook, and now when I do that, it is what I call remedial stuff. It's that initial walk. You have to almost start. You can't go right to the you're accountable, that you're the victim. You have to explain that to them, because everybody, you have to see where the law of attraction works first. Then you have to see how how being accountable and not being that victimhood or that blame because again, blame is resistance in the law of attraction. So when you see that, but you can't get there day one. So to me, it's about getting them to see how this all comes together. And it probably takes, 2 or 3 sessions of them really understanding okay, here's the law of attraction. Here's how it works. Here's what you invite into your life. And here's what and when I say this, it's unintentional. There's nobody, I very seldom run across somebody who's like, hey, let me do this on purpose. They don't realize they're doing it on purpose, but they do. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing, I've witnessed with me personally when my finances, the concept with me and finances, and how I never, I struggled for many years with my money, and the more I thought about the money, the more I struggled. And when I understood releasing that and all the other stuff that went with it, then I had money. And it changed because I realized I'm not a victim of all of this other stuff. It doesn't matter. The law of attraction doesn't care about all that. It's what you're feeling right now. And when you're in that victimhood, you're feeling like you can't have because of this other stuff. I'm not worthy, or I can't have because this stuff happened to me. It's like when I first got a felony conviction years ago due to my actions of my addiction, I remember thinking, I will never be able to work in the field that I love. I will never be able to do anything because I have that. I viewed it like, wow, this is over.
Like your life
every
is
time
ending.
somebody, yeah. Well, and I jokingly tell people now my felony conviction has become a credential. It's people are like, wow, you came back from that. I've adopted children. I'm a single male that adopted children with so I just turned it upside down, and it happened, and I can't excuse my behavior. Of course not. I'm at fault. I did it, but I can show you my track record since then, what I've done since then. And that's the area that I want to focus on. So I use those examples to help pull people out of the depths of that whole ongoing addicted mindset of the victim, and nothing's going to get better. And I can't see, because it's historically always been that way. the one of the young men that I mentioned earlier was looking for a job, and he didn't really want a job. He said, "I'm really tired of hearing no. Everybody just." His theory is people have gotten together and said they won't hire him.
Oh, okay.
Accurate. And when I put this to him, it's really funny. I said, "You've applied for 6 jobs in 3 weeks. And so you're tired of no?" I said, "I know people that apply for 100 jobs in 6 weeks. You haven't." His perception is he can't get a job no matter what. So that energy he brings in, when he does that, he will never get a job with that energy. He never will. Plus, I don't think he really wants a job, but that's a different part of the story.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And okay, so the first step then is the education of the person, helping them understand that they, until they change their mindset, they're going to continue to carry on with the old pattern, and it's going to go on endlessly because they haven't addressed it. But even after you address it, I mean, you're in a bad place right there. No matter what your situation is, you're in a really, really bad place. How do you climb out? How do you do that? I mean, your amazing story is that you climbed out, and obviously that gives you a lot of basis for rapport with your clients, and you've actually told numbers of stories along that line. So the rapport certainly helps, but even so, they still have to climb out.
Absolutely, and everything that I literally break it down to the most simplest of tasks. They're within this life coaching skills style that I use. I use solution focused coaching. I start with what the problem is now. What's your perception of today's problem? I'm unemployed. I'm about to lose my house. Let's start with that. Do I call the mortgage company? Do I help them? What area can I address today to begin step one? It's about momentum. What does that look like? Great example of this of a young man that I worked with in the residential setting years ago. He was one class away from getting his degree, and he quit school. And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You're one class away?" And "Oh yeah. Well, I can't get back into school. They told me I can't go." I said, "That's ridiculous." I said, "Go when you get home. Go see your student advisor, get that class taken care of, and you'll be fine." "Well, I don't have any money." I said, "Just go see her and figure out what you have to do." And so with a lot of prodding, I get him to do that. So he left on a Tuesday, and he was supposed to do that Wednesday morning. So Wednesday afternoon, I hadn't heard from him, so I gave him a call and said, "How did it go today?" And he goes, "Yeah, I knew it. They wouldn't take me back." I go, "Really?" I said, "That doesn't really sound right." I said, "Tell me what happened." I talked to the lady, and she said that since I had an incomplete, that I wasn't eligible for any financial aid, and I just got up and left. And I said, "That doesn't sound right." So I had him call the lady, his student advisor, and she gets on the phone. She goes, "Oh, I'm really glad you called back." She said, "You just got up and left." and she said, "What I was trying to get you to say is all you have to do is go to the professor and have him agree to whatever the incomplete, turn it into whatever. He has the power to turn it into whatever he wants to turn it into." And there's another term. And if he does that, you would be able to finish up and take that one class. And she said, "In fact, he's here. And let me transfer you." So she transferred me him. I explained what his scenario was. He was dealing with addiction. And he said, "Oh my goodness, I've been in recovery for 20 years. Of course I will do this. And please take my class again. If I know this was going on, I would have helped you more. Now that I know that, please take it, and we'll get this taken care of." He was in school in 3 days.
Wow.
But he had anticipated, he had just bought into this. This can't work. And there had no shot of working at that point.
So, okay.
That's big.
Okay. So if that's it, it just seemed too simple. I mean, he's dealing with this really, really bad situation for the longest period of time, and just one little thing turns it around. That seems too crazy. I mean, let's go from another perspective. The law of attraction. We mentioned that a few times. Obviously, that's what the show's about. So let's go at it from that way. How do you use the law of attraction in the process of climbing out? How do you overcome victimhood using the law of attraction?
Well, the law of attraction is pretty much the law of action. within the law of attraction is the law of action. What action can I take now that's moving in a positive direction? We just use that school thing as an example. That's the easiest one but you're facing a felony criminal charge. You're facing a bad check. Let's take action. Let's pick up the phone. Let's call. I'm changing my life. When momentum begins, it gains a lot of steam quickly. When you can begin some type of action that gains momentum, you start feeling better. So I use it. All I need is a little success. Sometimes it's the most simple success. I'd use the law of attraction by saying, hey, you haven't been able to get up before 10 o'clock in the last month. You got up at 8 today. Wow. That's it. It sounds silly, but I start with any success. I try to create a win. And then I use that win to apply the law of attraction about look at your life. Now that you've proved you can do this, now that you can move forward, let's do it. And then use that really excited, that really, we got it. And I help them continue to get wins. The law of attraction then invites more wins. Then he or she starts anticipating wins. And then that's what happens. That's the law of attraction's action here.
Now, and we talked a little bit about this last week about how your approach, your perspective on it is a bit different from, say, Abraham Hicks' approach. Although we also kind of agreed that they're really just two different ways of looking at the same thing. But the Abraham Hicks approach is to get yourself into alignment first and use that as a basis for taking inspired action. Whereas you kind of reverse the process. You say, well, let's take some action first in order to get inspired, in order to get into a better feeling place. Which is
right.
It's a different order.
It's hard to get. Yeah, it's really hard to get somebody, in my mind, who has dealt with defeat and negative thought processes for years. That could take a long time before they really believe it. And they're not going. A lot of times they don't believe it can happen because they see zero evidence to support that. Mm-hmm. Well, you did that, but you're the lucky one. However, if they can, and this is where the Mike Dooley's version of it, where your GPS only works when you get moving. Mm-hmm. Then no matter which way you go, it'll correct it. And that, I'm sort of that way. Any little win, it starts that, it unfreezes where we're at. So it is, to me, that is about getting in alignment by figuring out some win this person can have, or helping them see where their wins are already at. I know a very successful financial planner that basically lost everything. And he was so defeated, and he kept saying, well, the business has changed. I'll never make any money again. Are you kidding me? I mean, the fact that I can't believe you're so easily defeated. And we had to find areas that he still could win in his mind at. And we used those tools to move forward. Now he's back to doing what he used to do, but he was stuck in this negative, and it's hard to pull him out. So getting aligned, sometimes, again, you get to prime the well a little bit by getting them aligned. And that gives some type of win, some movement, some action is required from my perspective to start the alignment process. You can't just sit there. That's not accurate. You probably can. It would be, I go back to what I went through. It was very hard for me to sit there and believe things would be different, no matter who was telling me that, because I was facing so much stuff. I had to move. I had to do stuff. And once I started doing stuff, Walt, then it made a difference.
So you're saying that financial planner, with your help, got it turned around, just not by getting themselves into alignment first before they took any action, but you just helped them take some action steps in order to feel the alignment. That was the actual order of things.
Right. Right. Sometimes you can even go historically and use something that has happened and remind them of who they are, what they've done, successes, and where they're at. And that's anything that they can feel the alignment and say, you're right. If I can get their attention, get them to sit up in their seat and say, you're right, I get it, I can feel it. And once that's that vibration, that's that law of attraction. When that gets lit, you're in incredible shape in my mind. And that's how everything can get going. But figuring out how to light it and light the fuse and get that movement, it is, sitting on the old joke of sitting on the couch and saying, I really want to invite a job into my life, or I need to get a line before I go out and look for a job. But when you're in the middle of a depression, in the middle of a lot of failure, that's more difficult than it sounds. But if I can start a little win, if I can get something, some movement, I made my bed today. I got up early today. I walked around the block. Something that does something different where we could compound it. I've seen a marathoner I know now start with walking around the block in his depression. He now runs marathons. So it got him moving.
And Abraham, I think, agrees with that because they've taught that if you're in a really bad place like depression, reaching for a good feeling place is just not within reach. It's just not there. So they recommend the incremental approach. When you're in depression, they say go for something that's not perhaps in the very positive range, but in the less negative range. Something a little bit higher up, like frustration instead of being depressed, or even getting angry to get some of it out, or something like that, and then working your way up incrementally up the scale.
And I think again we're saying pretty much the same thing. And a lot of it is personalities and how people do things. But the to me, depression is deep, dark depression is the law of attraction on the opposite side of what we're seeking. It really is. So
talk about that for a little bit.
Well, depression is everything is negative. There is no hope. If you've ever, and people overuse that term depression, it's they're not feeling, you're feeling down. There's all kind of levels of it. I'm talking that I've had depression where I was physically could not get out of my chair. I just couldn't stand up. I couldn't. My electricity was turned off in my house. There was food rotting in the sink, and I couldn't get up. I was paralyzed by my depression. There is zero chance that I was going to get into any alignment until something moved forward. And so the opposite of what we're seeking, depression just brings, you're vibrating on the most negative level possible. You're inviting everything horrible into your life, and it's the law of attraction is responding. It doesn't, again, law of attraction doesn't care, doesn't have emotion. So it's saying, obviously this guy, that's what he wants. So let's give it to him. And that's what you're vibrating at. And so to pull yourself out of that, you have to believe in, when you're suicidally depressed or on the edge of suicidally depressed, in all great respect to all the great law of attraction teachers, you're not going to get somebody say, well, your perspective's got to change. They'll be like, okay, thanks, buddy. It really is so deep that, you get to move it. I had this happen. This isn't my recovery, but, in that depression that I was telling you about, where I was stuck in a chair, I was living in Tampa. This is before I got a recovery, but I'd lost everything, fiance, everything was just horrible. And I had a friend that we used to play racquetball a lot, and he came over and he bugged me to play racquetball. And I wouldn't answer the door at first, and he said, I want to keep knocking, and finally got up and said, what do you want? He said, we're playing racquetball. I said, I'm not playing racquetball. He said, I'm not leaving until we're playing racquetball. He literally just was not going to leave me alone. So we went out and played a game of racquetball. That got me moving. I got home. I cleaned up my house. I got things moving again. I needed that movement. I needed that little win there. That I didn't win at racquetball, but you know what I mean by that.
I know what you mean. Yeah, you need to have the activity to get the feeling up in some way.
Yes, right. And I think what happens is sort of curtailing, sort of coattailing what we were talking about earlier, is when a therapist or anyone is trying to treat depression by reminding people how depressed they are. Well, isn't it hard? Yes, it's not your fault that all this happened to you. Well, I agree. It is not their fault what got them there, but where we part company, staying there is your fault. It's the truth, and it's again not the most welcome thing by a lot of people to hear that. But whatever gets us to depression, me being in that house and it had a lot of reasons of why I was there. But at the end of the day, I was responsible to get up and get moving, period. And fortunately I had a friend that really helped me do that. I wasn't going to do it on my own, but once I got movement going, then I could do it. And so that, to me, that's when I walk people through it. I just try to get some kind of beginning, where we can make something happen in a good way. And then it grows from there. and that's sort of universal with everybody I work with. And it does. You could I've seen great things come from really really small beginnings or really depressed beginnings, but that change of mindset, and when you realize depression is inviting more depression, being happy is inviting more happiness. It's just the most simple concepts.
And that's what I was going to ask you to talk about next. Why is that win so important? I mean, we know theoretically that, Abraham teaches it. Other law of attraction people teach it, that you got to have that alignment in some form. You have to find some way to get a happier place, some place that feels better than where you are right now in order to start attracting other stuff. But why is that win so important? What's such a big deal? I mean, it's not like your circumstances have changed.
It gives you hope. I mean, it gives if in my scenario here, I'll describe a very dire situation. I ended up at a halfway house in Florida, August 17th of 1995. I was facing felony criminal charges. My fiance had dumped me. My family's not speaking to me. At $250,000 in credit card debt. I just got fired from my job that I stole money from. I was homeless, and the vehicle I was in was when they found that they were going to repossess it. So not exactly a great mindset to be in.
No.
Everything is horrible there. So if you look at that whole picture, Walt, how do you get out of that? I don't know what you do with that. I mean, I don't know how you get out of that. However, the obvious thing is I got to take some action, and I didn't know it at the time because I was so early in this, but I knew I had to get a job. So I went that night when I got there, or the following night, I went and found a restaurant I could go to work at. Started working at a restaurant within a few days. And what the restaurant did, that got me moving. It got a little bit of money. And now obviously it didn't fix all those financial problems, but it at least gave me some action where I can feel good. I started feeling a little better. I started believing I could do this. And the more I did, the more I started. And I paid off over a period of 5 years, $250,000 in credit card debt. I turned my life around. I stopped gambling. I paid off my restitution. I made amends to people I'd taken money from. And I did all that by starting waiting tables.
That's astonishing to think
that
about.
Was the action that got me going.
$250,000, that's $250,000 divided by 5 years. That's $50,000 a year on average that you paid off. That would seem almost insurmountable.
Let me throw a flag on that for a second when I say that.
Okay.
I negotiated debts on that $250,000. When you're really far behind, I do that for clients as well. By the time we were done, that $250,000 was negotiated down to about $10,000.
Wow.
But they got their money. My point is they agreed to a payoff. And it was less than 10 cents on the dollar, but they were 4 years, hadn't gotten any money. So, but you can do that. That's the beautiful thing. But I spent hours on the phone with these, credit card and finance companies negotiating this debt. And, at the time they couldn't do anything. I mean, so I'm like, well, it's all going to be off my credit in 3 years, so I can wait it out, or you can get some money off of this. And I made payments to them, tiny payments over time. And so when I say I paid it off, I negotiated and paid that off.
Okay. That's interesting too, because isn't that what if you're in debt, you get all these calls from all these debt reduction companies. Isn't that what they're basically trying to do?
That's exactly what it is. Funny because when I have a client says, well, I'm going to call this debt, I said, we can do that. You don't need a debt. They charge a premium to do that. You can do that yourself. Credit card companies will do that. So there's a million and one ways to deal with that stuff. So it worked out well. Now again, I had this restitution to the state of Florida. They don't work out negotiated plans. You got to pay that off. And all those wins started to get more wins. And so you have to start in some direction, some type of action. And when you get somebody motivated to a place of, I just got to get them to move a little bit, they can't expect to see the whole answer. When I was doing this, Walt, I had no idea it was going to turn out as good as it did. I had no idea, but I knew I had to get started.
And somehow you not only knew you had to get started, you actually got started and kept going despite the overwhelmingness of it. Because that's the point I was trying to get to is, you have this overwhelming task, and you're starting by waiting tables, and you know that's practically futile. I'm almost amazed that it didn't stop you right there.
Well, yeah, and I don't know why, other than that was all that was available at the time as far as jobs go. I'm a convicted felon. Nobody's going to hire me back then with that new of a felony conviction. And so waiting tables seemed to be the only thing. And then I had other jobs. I did odd jobs. I did whatever I had to do, but it all sort of started coming together and paying a little bit at a time. And then I started getting, again, the more wins I had, the more I started to believe. And then when you started to believe, the halfway house that I was living in, I eventually took training to be a counselor there. And then I became co-owner of that company, and everything just kept growing from there. So it was an amazing journey that, looks like it was all planned out, but I was clueless as we were going. I didn't know how it could ever work out.
Yeah. And of course, today you are incredibly successable. You're in high demand. I mean, how many job offers do you get per week? I mean, some ridiculous number. I don't remember what it was, but you've told me in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I average one every 2 weeks. Somebody's calling a job offer somewhere.
And not anything that you're not looking for a job. They're just calling you. They just found you and they said, "Well, wow, I really want you."
Right. Yeah. Like treatment centers, people are reaching out. They're running a new treatment center for addiction. The concepts that they want to implement that, and I do consulting, but I don't want another job at this point, at least. I love what I do. I don't want to step away from it. But it's such a different world, And all started with just a change of perspective.
And not only started with it, you kept with it. That's the part that I think is just really noteworthy. You stayed with it. You just refused to deviate from the idea that you can get better, and that it's up to you to get better.
Yeah.
And in the process, you got better.
Yeah. And then again, the discovery of I instinctively knew this, before I ever learned about the law of attraction. It's what I've always felt. And then when I discovered the actual law of attraction and how it works, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've never have been able to put. I remember one time, years ago, Walt, I was in a really desperate state. And I can remember sitting on the back porch of a friend's house and I remember talking about the energy I'm putting off right now is so bad. Mm. And he looked at me and he goes, "What are you talking about?" I can't describe it. I said, I just am putting off bad energy. And he said, "That's just ridiculous." Well, I didn't know about thought vibration, thought attraction. I didn't know all that stuff at the time, but I instinctively felt it back then.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff. Well, thank you, first of all, for sharing your story again. I know you've done it before, and you did it once again in a beautiful way, particularly tied into a topic as sensitive and as difficult as this one can be for many people. But I think we've perhaps at least, perhaps broken a few barriers and said, you know what? We can put this whole blame thing behind us. We don't need to blame anymore. We can actually decide we're going to just take some responsibility and just go for making our own lives better. Sometimes we need help to do that. By the way, if somebody does need some help immediately, maybe we have somebody listening who's in a place like that. You're probably a person they're interested in talking to because they figure, oh, well, that's somebody who climbed out of it. How do they reach out to you?
Now, my website is joelelston.com. My email address is joelelston@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out in either capacity. I'll always respond. If I can't help you, I can maybe refer somebody that can. But I'm passionate about the law of attraction. It's just the thing that I felt I was born to do. And so anytime I can apply it or help others see it, I love to do it.
That sounds great. Well, thank you once again for doing this. I mean, I always look forward to doing our shows every week anyway, but this week was particularly good. So, I mean, just thank you for what you do. And by the way,
thank you, Walt.
Well, you're welcome. And for those who are new listeners, I want to remind you, most of our listeners are subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, take a moment, just go to the website, loatoday.net, and subscribe. All the instructions are right there because we want you to keep on coming back for episode after episode. Joel, been a pleasure. We'll talk again next week.
All right, Walt. Great to talk to you, my friend.
And we'll see you all next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.